Hello, and welcome to another Baldur's Gate 3 build video. Today, I'll be going over my Wildshape Barbarian build. For this guide, I'll actually be covering two versions of this build. One that is more in line with the name Wildshape Barbarian, and another that focuses on making the Wildshape aspect of the build stronger. I'll first cover the levels for this build before going over the items from each act to use for the build. So, without further ado, let's get into the build. Starting out, for race selection, the only one I recommend is Dweger, due to their free access to the Enlarge spell. This, if cast before wild shaping, will linger into your wild shape. Other than Dweger, because we will be spending a lot of our time wild shaped, race selection does not really matter, so just pick what you want. For the ability scores, I have 3 suggestions based on which level path you plan on following. If you plan on following the Barbarian level path, aka the leftmost level path, I recommend having a more strength and constitution focused stat split. This will allow you to make better use of your non-wild shape melee combat. While it may seem strange that we are choosing an odd number in our strength and constitution, we will be rounding these out with our feat choices. As for the full wild shape druid path, you can either fully forgo all your physical ability scores as these stats will get overwritten when you wild shape, or you could drop some of those casting stats in favor of higher dex and constitution to make you a better caster when you're not wild shaped. At level 1, we start as a barbarian, granting us access to rage. Raging gives us resistance to all physical damage and slightly increases the damage of our melee attacks. If we rage before wild shaping, the rage will linger into our wild shape as long as we take or deal damage each turn. Moving ahead to level 3, we acquire our wild shapes. Similar to rage, while we cannot cast spells while wild shaped, any concentration based spells that we cast before wild shaping, we will continue to concentrate on even after wild shaping. As for the wild shape forms we acquire, I will not be talking about every single one, so if I don't specifically talk in depth about a wild shape, because I believe that option to be less valuable in combat than one of the other options. So, for our first set of options, I have 3 recommendations. The first being the Circle of the Moon exclusive option, the Bear. The Bear is the tankiest of the available wild shape options, with a base health of 30, and access to its Goading Roar ability, which forces all nearby enemies to roll a saving throw or be taunted and forced to attack you. Next up, the Spider, which I think is the most well-rounded of the options. The Spider's basic attack, Venomous Bite, deals decent damage and also poisons targets. This, combined with its high mobility thanks to its Arachnid Leap, and its crowd-controlling Web Spit, make the Spider a highly mobile threat that can spread debuffs among enemies. For our final of the options, the Wolf is an effective option if you have a melee ally to combo with. All of the Wolf's abilities either want or require an ally nearby to take advantage of. Starting with their passive, Pack Tactics, this grants you advantage on all attacks as long as another ally is also in melee range of the target you are attacking. Their next ability is Exposing Bite, which, while it deals less damage than a normal attack, your next attack, or an ally's next attack made in melee range against that target is a guaranteed crit. Their final ability is Inciting Howl, which once per combat allows you to give all nearby allies a boost in movement speed. Moving on from our wild shapes, at level 5, we get our first feat. And for this, there's only one option, Tavern Brawler. Tavern Brawler was recently made to work with wild shapes, and since many of the wild shapes have large strength stats, this feat will give our wild shapes a great boost to their damage. Next up at level 6, we gain Wild Strike. This functions like extra attack, but only while we are wild shaped. We also want to respec out of our Barbarian level and go a full 6 levels in Druid. This is because at 6 levels in Druid, we gain access to our Owlbear wild shape, which will become our primary wild shape of choice until level 10, if you plan on following the full Druid build path. The Owlbear has very high base stats in addition to its many other useful abilities. First of which are its basic attacks, which, in addition to dealing a lot of damage, also have increased range and knock back enemies on hit. The Owlbear also has great mobility and the ability to deal damage while moving thanks to its crushing flight. Next up, the Owlbear has its Rupture skill, which knocks back and damages all enemies around the Owlbear. And finally, the reason we are speccing out of Barbarian, the Owlbear has access to its own Owlbear Rage. While this Rage functions a little differently than normal Barbarian Rage, it has the same damage resistance and damage increase benefits that the normal Rage has, while also curing all enemies around the Owlbear. The main downside of this ability is that, unlike normal Rage, the Owlbear Rage dissipates if the temporary health gained by the Rage is removed. Now, moving forward, the build path is going to split into two. I'll first cover the leftmost Barbarian path, and then wrap back around and cover the Druid path shortly after. So, for the Barbarian path, we go 6 levels in Barbarian. At level 9, with 3 levels in Barbarian, we take the Wildheart subclass. This grants us our Bestial Heart, for which we want to take the Bear Heart. This upgrades our Rage, granting us resistance to all damage except Psychic, making us significantly tankier. Could also go the Elk Heart for the extra movement, but I find the tank stats to be more worthwhile. Next up, at level 10, you get our second feat. For this, I recommend going Resilient Constitution. This grants us Constitution saving throw proficiency, and rounds out our Constitution stat. This feat also adds that additional Constitution to our Wild Shapes, meaning that our Owlbear's odd Constitution stat will be rounded out as well. At level 11, we get Extra Attack, which, it is important to note, does stack with your Wild Strike Extra Attack in your Wild Shape. So, you get 3 attacks with your action in Wild Shape. I don't know if this interaction is intended, but unlike the Pact of the Blade Warlock Extra Attack, this extra attack stacking does still work in Honor Mode as of the recording of this video. At level 12, we gain our passive Aspect of the Beast. I like either the Wolverine or Elk, but you can take the one that you believe complements your playstyle best. Looping back around to the Druid level path, at level 8, we get our second feat, and same as Barbarian, we want to go with Resilient Constitution. At level 10, we get Improved Wild Strike, which gives us a third attack in Wild Shape. We also get a lot more Wild Shape options, the first of which I will be talking about is the Earth Myrmidon. The Earth Myrmidon is the tankiest and deals the most damage of all the Wild Shapes. The first of most mobility options is Elemental Warp. This skill is available to all Myrmidon Wild Shapes and is effectively a free Misty Step you can use every turn. The Earth Myrmidon's alternate movement option is Burrow. This functions similarly to Elemental Warp, but also has a chance to prone enemies around where you emerge. The Earth Myrmidon's basic attack is Grounded Thunderstrike, and despite the ability saying it does much less damage than this, it actually deals 18 flat damage plus 3d10 thunder damage. This attack additionally can prone enemies, making them an easier target for further attacks. The Earth Myrmidon's alternate attack is Sludgy Sling, which does damage in a small AoE and spreads mud to slow enemies. The Earth Myrmidon's final ability is Muck to Metal, which lowers your movement speed by 6 meters in exchange for 2 more AC. This trade-off is more than worthwhile due to the Myrmidon's various mobility skills. The other level 10 wild shape of note is the Air Myrmidon. The Air Myrmidon is highly mobile and provides good damage and utility for you to make use of. The Air Myrmidon also has Elemental Warp, but in addition, all non-Earth Myrmidons can fly, greatly increasing their mobility. Its primary attack is Electrified Flail, which in addition to its great damage, can also stun enemies for 2 turns. The Air Myrmidon's next ability is Raging Vortex, which is an AoE silence that also deals bludgeoning damage each turn to creatures inside of it. The final ability is Invisibility. This Invis can be cast once per short rest and lasts indefinitely until you take some action to break it. Although I'm not going to fully go over it, the Fire Myrmidon also deserves a mention if you are playing on a difficulty below Honor mode, as it is essentially a more damage-oriented glass cannon version of the Air Myrmidon. However, on Honor mode, due to the haste mechanic being nerfed, I find the Fire Myrmidon to not be worth it. Also, if you plan on playing around the Air and Fire Myrmidons, you will want to respec and change your feats to Savage Attacker and Sentinel, as these two Myrmidons do not gain value from our previous feat choices as they wield weapons. For our final two levels, I like going 2 points in Fighter for the defense fighting style, which adds its additional AC to your wild shapes as long as you are wearing armor before wild shaping, and Action Surge. Alternatively to Fighter, if you want to be a better caster, you can go 2 levels in Wizard for better spell versatility and access to level 6 spells. And with that, that's everything for the levels. Now I'll be moving on to the items. So, for the items for this build, I had a tough time deciding what to include, as, more than pretty much for any other class, this build could honestly get away with having literally no items, thus freeing up many of those items to be used on other party members. But, of course, I'm not going to just say, yeah, there's basically no items, and move on. So, here are at least a few item recommendations, though you should know that deep down I truly believe the best way to play this build is to forgo most of your better items for your party, while using this build as a low economy tank for your team. But I digress. Starting off in Act 1 with the weapons, the Shattered Flail can be quite good as a barbarian weapon for its continuous healing. Alternatively, Morning Frost deals great damage as a staff. Later on, Skin Burster can be a good option from the Mountain Pass for making us even tankier. All of the movement speed increasing or movement ability granting items are obviously great as we are a melee-centric class, but I would recommend just saving these for a different party member. For clothing, the Blood Guzzler's Garb grants us some additional damage to work with when we are playing outside of our wild shape. Moving on to Act 2, the weapon I recommend is the Halberd of Vigilance as it increases our initiative and does great damage. For a similar reason, the Sentinel Shield is also another great option as it increases your initiative by a lot. The Enraging Heart Garb and Mighty Cloth are decent clothing options for barbarians. The Dark Justiciar Gauntlets and Flawed Heldas Gauntlets both increase our out of wild shape damage, though depending on your party you may want to use these on other members. The Ring of Free Action can help you avoid CC. And moving on to Act 3, let's first start off with the items that actually work with our wild shapes, starting off with our best armor, the Armor of Moon Basking, which grants our wild shapes more HP and AC. Next up, the Shapeshifter Hat gives us an additional wild shape charge. The Corvid Token gives our wild shapes permanent Feather Fall and increases their jump distance. And finally, the Shapeshifter's Boon Ring gives us an additional buff while wild-shaped. Moving on to the weapons for barbarian players, Irulna does great damage and can pivot you into a throwing build if you so desire. The Sword of Chaos gives some added health sustain to play with in combat, and Balduran's Giant Slayer does great damage and grants us Enlarge. The Hellrider Longbow can increase our initiative, or alternatively, the Dead Shot, which can increase our crit chance. For helmets, the Mask of Soul Perception is a great option due to its increased initiative and attack roll bonus. The Cloak of Displacement is never a bad choice, although it may be better suited for someone else in your party. Similarly, the Helldust Gloves, which can increase your damage, and the Amulet of Greater Constitution, which can increase your tankiness out of wild shape, are both great options, although they might be better suited for someone else. And that's everything for my recommendation. There are, obviously, many more items that can be useful for this build, but these are just the ones I felt would be most useful while not cutting into potential items for other party members. Anyways, thank you guys for watching. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Sorry this video took longer to come out than planned for, but I hope you enjoyed it regardless. Either way, I'll see you guys next video. Bye!